Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Product Tank London. Thank you for joining us. We are coming to you live from the UK, but thank you to everyone that's tuning into this recorded on YouTube as well. Got a great set of speakers for you tonight, which we'll introduce shortly. But just as a reminder for where Product Tank has come from, it started as a meetup for oops, sorry, folks. We've got a bit of feedback going on there. We started in a pub above a pub in London, and now we've grown to a community over 200 cities across the world. Lots of different ways that you can get involved. Firstly, you can see the playlist of all the previous Product Tank remote sessions from London and from around the world on YouTube. Do subscribe to see all the latest ones that are going online. You can also come back to see us in London on 21st of October and the 18th of November, and a special Christmas edition that we are planning at the moment. There's lots of other ways to get involved. You can visit the Mind Product website. You can sign up to the Prioritized newsletter, and you can also join the Slack community, where there's channels for everything from mentoring to jobs to conferences and just general questions about our craft. We're also just planning next year's topics for Product Tank London, so please do drop us a line either through Twitter or the comment section on YouTube about what you'd like to see next year. All of our topics are picked by the community, so we'd really like to hear what you're most interested in. We've also got now with Mind the Product lots of different options for our membership levels. You get some great stuff for free on the website and through all of the Product Tank meetups, but you can get even more through our Prioritized and Leaders memberships. If you head to mindtheproduct.com/membership, you can find all the details there. Also just launched is the new MTPCon digital event, which is happening in the middle of November. You've got some great speakers there, including Marty Kagan and Asha Haji, who have both been on Product Tank London stage and are fantastic. There are early bird tickets up there at the moment, and each ticket includes a year-long membership to the Mind the Product membership, where you can get special content and lots of Ask Me Anythings with all kinds of people like Marty Kagan. There's also a whole bunch of remote training workshops going on the Mind the Product at the moment. You can see some of the topics there, but the numbers are really limited, so it's much more like a kind of coaching session. These have been really popular, and there's only a few places left on the ones that are upcoming. So if you fancy it, do get on down and have a look. Again, you can find all the information on the Mind the Product website. If you've got questions for our speakers, then on YouTube, just click the show chat button and leave a comment there. We'll be doing a Q&A after everyone's finished their talks, which Mark will pull all the questions from YouTube for that. So without further ado, over to our curator for the evening, Mark Abraham.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, where we're going to talk about careers in product management and how you can progress your career in product. And, I think it's fair to say that's a popular topic amongst our community at the best of times, but particularly now where people might have lost jobs, looking to move, are uncertain about what's going to happen with their product or businesses. We thought it was the best time to cover this. And to do so, we've got three amazing speakers. We've got Sari, who we're going to kick off with in a minute. We've got Nick, and we've got Hope. And let's start with Sari. Sari is product director at Songkick, which is a London-based concert recommendation app. Sari started her career in product management, quite unusually, I would say, but she's going to elaborate on this, straight after uni as a product intern at Shazam. And what she's going to do in her talk is basically share some of her learnings and her journey from university, first role in product, and what she's done since, and particularly what she's learned since. So with that said, I was going to ask for a massive virtual hand for Sari, our first speaker tonight.
Great, thanks, Mark. So yeah, as Mark said, I'm Sari. I'm currently product director at Songkick, and I'm here to kind of talk about how you can progress your product career. And when I was thinking about how to talk about this, I decided to go at it from the aspect of kind of how do you gain confidence quickly, because that's how I believe I've actually progressed my career. I've broken that into two main parts. So gaining confidence in yourself and also how you gain the confidence of others. And I believe so that they can actually believe that you do more. This is all based on my own personal experience. So I hope some of it is useful and works for you. And I've tried to throw in practical tips and examples along the way. So yeah, let's get started. So as Mark said, I think I'm one of the people that I know that kind of started a career straight into product. I studied engineering, and during the 4 years of my degree, I did a lot of work experience, placements, and internships. I think the last time I counted, I was somewhere at around 12 different things that I did while I was there. And I'm guessing there's not that many people on this call or who are watching this later that are still in education. But my top tip for people, if you do know anyone that is still in education, is that university is an excellent time to start gaining that experience. So when I finished off with university, I started my first role in product as a product intern at Shazam, like Mark said, where I had a great time for 3 months. I definitely think that the experience I gained during those internships helped me figure out how to really prepare and shape my application for that role and then be the person that got it. Reading the job description for that role was kind of the first time I ever heard about product management. But it was also when I think really I actually fell in love, or at least became infatuated with the idea of product management. And ever since then, it's only been proved to be the right career for me. Later on, after I finished my internship, I went on to Sky to do my first permanent role, which was a product experience executive at Sky, working kind of between marketing and product. Wasn't really ideal. I learned loads about TV, knew I wanted to stay in TV, but I also wanted more of a clearer software product management role. And so I was lucky enough to be offered a role at ITV, which was both a step up in kind of seniority and in the amount of responsibility I had. But also it was really the place where I learned what good product management is. And also that I could be a good product manager and that I had the skills and the ability to kind of nurture myself into a good product manager. Learned a lot in that time. And when the time was right, kind of thought it was time to move to Songkick. At Songkick, I started as a product manager, and then over the couple of years, took on more and more responsibility for planning our objectives, our metrics, shorter, longer term strategy, and then became product director earlier this year. So that's been my experience, that's been my kind of trajectory so far. In terms of my talk, I'm going to start with kind of how do you gain the confidence of others so that they believe in you, they think you can do more, and they give you opportunities to do more. So my first and maybe one of the most important things I'll talk about is how do you become an expert early on? And I put a little asterisk by expert because I'm not saying that you need to be a product guru 1 year on the job and know everything about product management or everything about strategy. But I think there are really clear things you can do to just position yourself as an expert within your business and within the role you're doing so that people trust you on certain areas and are more likely to offer you more responsibility. So the first one is actually how do you learn detail? So detail about your business model, user behavior on your products, things that aren't well known, so how certain products work, things that are in your area but also affecting wider areas of the business. Ways I actually worked on doing this was when questions came up that no one knew. So for example, it might be how do push notifications work because a different team works on that. Or in my case, there was also an example of what is the kind of cost per click or the cost per view or the revenue we're making? What are those kind of clear revenue numbers that no one in my team happened to know? Ask different teams for informational interviews. Go out and kind of scour, the rest of the company, learn things that keep coming up again and again in your team and in your area so that you can be the go-to person for when people are like, oh, we don't actually know how much. Nope, you know. So that's how you position yourself as an expert, even though it's using other people's knowledge. Play around with data. I love data. I think once you have access to kind of the data that's available in your organization, just start playing around with it. Try and make ask yourself questions, try and find answers here and there. One of the examples I have where this made a big difference for me was I'd always been interested at university about how you could use data to make business decisions. And so when I started my internship at Shazam, we were talking a lot about how we could decide how to change the navigation on Shazam web. And I thought, I kind of already know how to use Google Analytics. I've used it a bit before. I've learned a bit here. What if I make a little heat map, which just has a color-coded little map of where people are clicking on the existing navigation and actually on the existing homepage as a whole. Very simple thing, not anything that's beyond anyone on this call kind of thinking about. But what it did was it gave people something that they previously didn't have. a clear tool for making these decisions and having kind of conversations around these things without having to rely on people's opinions. And it was mentioned for the entire 3 months I was there. People always put up as something excellent I did. And it was a simple thing, but I already made myself seem like an expert by coming up with this way of looking at things. Second one I'd say is find your special. I think it's so important to figure out unique things that work really well for you, things you enjoy doing, and then make sure you're sharing those with your team and the people around you. So for myself, I really love the McKinsey problem solving tree. It's called the MECE, M-E-C-E, if anyone's interested or hasn't heard of it before. And I first discovered it when I was actually at a conference that they spoke at, and it really appealed to me and my way of thinking. And so what I did was read more into it and started using it on my own, in my own, when I was looking at my own problems or structuring my own analytical thinking, and very quickly started doing sessions with teammates on problem trees and estimation, sessions with other people, showing kind of the company how I do these things, and becoming, you know, crowning myself as the kind of meaty expert, again, in a small area, but becoming an expert in that way also helped me. So maybe for you, it's user research, maybe there's techniques or methods around ideation that you really enjoy, you find, use them and kind of make sure you're showing people, helping people with their own problems in that way. And then grow your expertise in the areas that you're really good at. We all need to get better at things that we're weak at, but I always think that you're more likely to shine in the areas that really energize you rather than drain you. So if you hate organizing things, don't decide you need to be a project management expert. Maybe like me, you prefer more analytical thinking and more quantifiable things. So you can pick up SQL or take an opportunity to learn SQL so you can do even deeper data analysis. And I think those kind of things really make a big difference because you're able to help people, you're able to have tangible results and tangible impact. And then the next one I have is kind of embrace the baptisms of fire. I had many of these in the last few years, and it is scary. Sometimes, you know, you wonder if you made the right choice. There was an experience I had very early on at ITV where I thought maybe I'd finally bitten off more than I could chew. But what I did was just accept that I was nervous, accept that I wanted the responsibility, and then figured out when I needed to ask questions versus when I needed to figure out my own ways of doing things. So there were times when I didn't have a manager because my manager had left the business, not IT, but in other roles. And I just said, you know, I'll ask questions about things I'm really unsure about, but for the other areas, how can I put my spin on it? How can I be more efficient or find new ways of running this project or solving this problem? And then, of course, ask for more responsibility. You might be in a situation where you think you're not really being given a leg up, you really want to progress, but you don't get the chance to prove yourself. Ask for chances to prove yourself. And even better than that is more specifically, when problems or new projects or things come up, pitch yourself as the person to lead on them or to help on leading on them because you have a good idea or an approach for how you can address that. So kind of do that planning, go to your manager and say, I really think I have a good way of running this and I would like to take the opportunity to either work with you on it or to help work on a team running this thing. Telling compelling stories, like a big part of being a product manager is all about being able to tell compelling stories. If you Google PM storytelling, there are so many techniques which you can find, and I'm sure you'll find one that is interesting to you that you love. I'm not really going to go into that because this talk is only 15 to 20 minutes long and I don't want to take up my entire time. But what I did want to say is something that I think I underrated quite early on was how important the regularity with which you tell these stories is. So it's one thing to say you're crafting compelling stories, but it really isn't good enough to kind of show up once a quarter with a great tale that you spend months planning and then wonder why everyone kind of forgets about it a week later. The reality is you need to be drip feeding your stories throughout the year, sharing new information, sharing new insights, finding different ways of making the same point over and over again with different stakeholders. And all the while, what you're doing is you're really priming your audience to be persuaded that you are the best person to kind of come up with the ideas and solve the problems that the business is facing and to lead on making those changes and to be impactful in that way. So things that are definitely important are kind of clearly highlight the problem whenever you're telling a story in a way that's effective with your audience, whether that's, you know, crafting a really emotional tale and talking about user quotes and things users have said, or it might just be they really care about the numbers and they want to know how much more revenue it will lead to. Share the solution and the evidence that you think is the right solution, and then just tell those stories over and over again. in applications. Nick is going to talk a lot more about applications in his presentation next. So I'm just going to briefly kind of touch on some things that I think I've noticed have really helped me stand out. Storytelling is very important here. You want to make sure you're clearly explaining how your skills can apply to the problem that the role is going to solve. But one of the things I found that many people don't do and still don't do, I think is becoming more popular information right now, is focusing their application on measurable outcomes. This is a structure that I think could really help if you struggle with doing that. It's created by kind of Laszlo Bock. Obviously, it's nothing that exciting, but he was Senior Vice President of People Operations at Google. And I know that I send this to a lot of people when they ask, when I see their CVs or I do CV reviews, and I can tell that they've not focused on what they've actually accomplished, but they focus more on tasks. I'm likely to send this out and just say, have a look and try and see how you can do this. I don't try and do this for every single bullet point perfectly. In general, I kind of focus on the 80%. So these are a couple of bullets from my CV. If anyone wants to, take a screenshot, they're just, if they're not perfect, I'm sure they can be improved. But what I do know is those 2 bullet points are very clearly telling you how impactful I was in those roles, the way in which I had impact, and why I kind of think, you can see how I could have that impact in your business as well. So yeah, so in terms of the last thing I want to talk about how to gain the confidence of other people, this one's really important to me. It's that you can be both easy to work with and effective. You don't have to be either or. I think there's a lot of talk in product management circles about being the archetype of the product manager that everyone hates, and the fact that, you can't be effective if you always say yes to people. And the reality is that I don't see that you need to bring unnecessary conflicts to every meeting just to make sure that things go well. Actually, you can say no. You have to say no. You will have to say no. But you can also influence towards positive outcomes without being difficult to work with. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes people won't be unreasonable or there won't be huge stakeholders that you have to kind of be a force against and feel that, feel that conflict, feel that weight or that burden. I think the most important thing to me is make sure you don't become that force for unreasonableness. Don't be the person that people don't want to speak to because you won't listen. So when you say no, make sure you're saying it with empathy and you're saying it with reason. You're not just saying no because you have the authority to do so. And of course, you still need to lead, but you can lead without making everyone else feel like an idiot. And I think that's something that we could all learn more from and learn more to do. So now I've talked a lot about how you gain the confidence of others, and actually a lot of those things hopefully will make you feel more confident in yourself as you take on more responsibility, you grow your skills, you show other people that you're growing your skills. But I want to talk a bit about some of the things that I think could specifically help in just gaining confidence in yourself, and hopefully these words will help and they'll make you feel like you are a good product manager and you have the ability to be a great product manager. The first one, and this was a realization I had that was very important to me, it's that strategy isn't magical. When I first started working as a PM, my manager asked me what I wanted to be great at, and I said strategy. I just wanted to be great at strategy. I wanted to be one of those people that kind of came in at the right moment and propelled businesses to success because I was such a great strategic mind. But more and more from working with some really great people, really smart people, and I hope coming up with some good strategy myself over the years, I realized that it's really a skill you just build up over time. So there's no need to feel intimidated by all the great success stories you hear, by the 1 PM that saved Netflix. Because a lot of these stories, as amazing as they are, in reality as well, I'm sure, the truth is they're written and they're kind of crafted after the fact. And that means that they come across a lot more simpler than they were in reality, and they often leave out some misses or some mistakes along the way. So don't think a strategy is magical. So I tried to think a little bit about what would I say strategy actually is then, if it isn't just magic. And I Googled what is strategy. I didn't see anything that really appealed to me or that was as simple as I wanted to share on this slide, because again, we only got 20 minutes and this isn't itself on strategy. But I think the reason why I say strategy is a skill you build up over time and why all those things I've talked about beforehand will help is because a lot of strategy just comes from understanding the problems that your business faces from the grassroots level. So understanding all the way from product data to how your metrics are going, to the user research and user problems you're finding, understanding the goals you have at the different levels of the business and why those goals exist. So not just we want to grow revenue by X amount, but why do we want to do that? Are there things we'll unlock? Why do certain departments have certain goals and certain revenue targets or growth goals? And then actually what opportunities are there out for you in the market? And I think this again is something that I didn't think a lot about when I started. So, you have a lot of great ideas, but realizing one, not only is user demand an important thing in understanding what the market opportunities are, but there's also the fact that new technology is always emerging. Sometimes you can partner with people and make things a lot easier that you couldn't build on your own. And then there's the reality that what can you as a company actually do? So you might be a company that you don't have a lot of capital. You need to kind of make revenue or make profit before you can put into really heavy capitalized projects. And so maybe you can't build this huge, gigantic platform and you have to start smaller. So understanding what you can actually do is something, again, that you'll learn with time, and it will allow you to be able to come up with strategies that work for your business and isn't just good overall. And then talking about progression, I think I just have a couple more points now, and then hopefully I've said something useful that you guys can take from. Talking about progression, I have this giant sign saying it's not awkward. I think in a lot of communities, it's considered, I think in a lot of Western communities, actually I think throughout the world, it's considered awkward to talk about progression or to ask about progression. But I think, you need to talk about your development. Otherwise, the chances are you might not be developing. You need to talk about the skills you want to grow in. Talk to your manager about the kind of product manager you want to be. You don't have to do everything. I think McKinsey had quite an interesting breakdown of product managers, but there are product managers that love data or more focused on data. Some more focused on user research. What do you enjoy? What kind of product manager do you want to be? These conversations may feel awkward early on, but focus them on how you want to improve so you can be a better asset to your organization. And then when you are actually having these conversations and you feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable, remember that your manager probably had very similar conversations to get to where they are. So they'll be more than happy to have the same with you. They're not thinking, you're trying to disturb them or you're trying to be too big for your boots. Actually, they'll probably be excited and interested in helping you, even if you may feel like you have to initiate those conversations. And if you're in a kind of company where, you've tried to ask about progression and you still can't figure out how to grow within that organization, maybe it's time to look for somewhere else to go. I think people are often quite scared to step out. They're always worried about what if it's worse. I would always say, take the chance. You're never stuck where you go next. But there are organizations where it's just really difficult to progress, and you might be chomping at the bit, gaining all these skills and not finding any room or anyone that's interested in helping you develop. So, in those cases, look around and try and see, are there other places that you might want to go work instead? And my last slide, worry less. I think if if any of you actually know me, if anyone's watching knows me, or if you ever meet anyone that I know, they definitely won't tell you that I'm a big worrier. I don't really believe in worrying too much about things, but particularly when you're looking at progressing your career. I know it's easier said than done, but I am a big believer in putting your effort into doing a good job rather than wondering whether everyone thinks you're doing a good job. You generally can't control all the aspects of perception, and there will be things about you that might just mean that someone doesn't have as much confidence in you as another person. But I think there is a real difference in how you come across to people when it shows that you're actually just invested in being impactful. You really want to make a difference rather than you just want to look like you're being impactful, or you want to look like you are on the right projects and you want to be put in places where people will see what you're doing. So focus on doing a good job. Focus on all the things I've talked about, growing your own skills. Make sure you are planning and those stories, you're communicating the impact you have. Definitely do that. Don't shy away. Don't hide in a corner. Talk about the things you do well and create these stories, but don't spend a lot of time after the fact just worrying about what everyone else thought. So yeah, that is my talk. That's everything I wanted to say. I hope some of it was useful. There are probably things you can screenshot if you need more practical tips. But yeah, I can't actually ask you questions right now. So I'm going to ask you to put your questions in the comments if you want, and then Mark will gather them as part of the Q&A later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Siri. That was great. I love how you obviously break it down, and particularly using your journey as a starting point. I love how you demystified strategy. Obviously, you can talk about that for hours, but that was awesome. So thank you so much for that. And as you said, please feel free to start dropping any questions or thoughts that you have, whether it's Siri's talk or Nick who's next or Hope. I'll try to collate them as best as I can. And after the 3 talks, we'll try to cover them in a Q&A session. We're going to go over to Nick. And Nick, for most of you, especially if you've been to a physical meetup of Product Tank London, shouldn't be a stranger, because Nick and his company, Few and Far, have been very loyal supporters of Product Tank and Mind the Product, probably for the last 8 years or so. And Nick really specializes in hiring product people and hiring product teams. He's an expert in recruiting, and what he's going to do in his talk tonight is share some of his tips and tricks when it comes to hiring, when it comes to applying, particularly for a role when you're looking to progress your career. How do you go about it? Again, that's bread and butter for what Nick does every day. So with that said, again, a big virtual hand. I'll show you my hands, Nick, for starters, and over to you. Nick, you're muted.
Always going to be one. Always going to be one. There you go. Is that better? Cool. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Cool. So, my name's Nick. I'll start again. I'm the co-founder of Few and Far. So, Few and Far is a talent consultancy that is focused specifically on helping companies scale their product, engineering, design, and data teams, as well as helping them lay the foundations for their talent strategy. So we've worked with a whole range of different businesses from companies like Babylon, Tesco, Just Eat, TransferWise, and Typeform. And I've been personally recruiting in the product space since 2009. So I've seen how a lot of different businesses grow their product businesses and how they grow their product teams. The key thing for now is to use the knowledge that I've gained over the last 11 years and help you scale out your career and take some advice going forward. So there's 3 areas that I'm going to cover. Today I'm going to talk about what makes a good product CV, how to nail your product interview, the art of proactive searching. They're the 3 core areas I think are going to try and develop the way that you're getting responses from roles and improving the conversion of applications to interviews and hopefully interviews to offers. First thing I want to ask, and I stood on stage last year and asked this at Product Tank when we were doing face-to-face events. Do you have a vision of what you want to be doing in the next 10 years? Now, out of the 400 people that were attending, only 3 put their hands up. But it's weird, right? Because you wouldn't have a business without having a problem you're trying to solve or a mission. You're not going to build a feature or a product without having a problem or an objective. So why do you not have the same thing for your career? Now, there's a whole pack that I've developed around this that's actually on my LinkedIn. And if you go onto my LinkedIn, it's the featured post, download it. It's about 40 pages, but I'm not going to go through it now, but it will really help. But the basics of it are there are 3 routes. There's the entrepreneurial route, which is all about setting up your own business or with a co-founder and scaling it. The second route is on the career side. So this is about developing your career, moving up into a leadership position. And product is a great one because you could be a CPO, of course, but you could also move into a chief digital officer role. You could also move into a CEO. There's a lot of CEOs at the moment in San Francisco that have got a product background. It's one of the best skill sets to prepare you for that role. And the final one is the portfolio route. And the portfolio route is one where it's becoming more prevalent, but essentially it's where you work with anything from 2 to 15 different businesses at the same time, from 3 days a week to 1 day a month. And you advise them on everything product, from product strategy to hiring product people to setting processes up from scratch and so forth. Each of these has pros and cons, and they all require specific types of experience to give you the best chance of success. All of those things are highlighted in the pack on my LinkedIn profile. So check those out. So once you know where you want to go, the key thing is about getting the next role. And the core part of getting the role, the first step, is going to be getting a good CV made and ready to go. So key tips: don't actually forget what a CV is for. If you use the job to be done framework, a CV is simply there to get you an interview. The interview itself is the thing that gets you the job. And I think people fall into the trap of thinking of a CV as a list of everything you've done, and it's not. It should be a document that highlights your experience that's relevant to the role that you're applying for. And also bear in mind who the reader is. We naturally make the assumption that the person reading our CV is a product person, and it could be, but it could also be a CEO. It could be a recruiter, an intern or external. And everyone has varying levels of knowledge when it comes to product. They may have hired product people before, they may not have. So make the basics obvious. I've had people rejected on CV stage because they didn't have the word agile in it. Obviously that I push back and we move forward from there, but you have to break it down to that level. Now the crux of it is the achievements and responsibilities. Now I've suggested you separate them, and there's different schools of thought on this. I like the idea of separating your achievements or career achievements from your actual responsibilities in your previous roles. The reason why is it can create a very nice narrative very quickly. And also it grabs the reader. A CV needs to be digestible. It needs to grab the eyes of the reader and make them want to read on. Now achievements, they can be, the delivery of a specific product. They can be increasing user base, but the best ones, and going back to something Sari mentioned, are outcomes. What was the commercial element of the achievement? Because you can very easily translate that commercial element into your business as the reader. And that's going to give you far more opportunity to be involved in the interview process. Now, responsibilities are another thing. Responsibilities are about what you were doing. And again, it's very easy here to put a huge amount of content in there. However, it's really important that you use that to tell a story, but also make them relevant, and use the JD to make sure it lines up. Now, I'm very grateful to Nathaniel Dadzi, who is someone that I spoke to on the 15th of August. And Nathaniel's a really great guy, very, very good experience in product, but hadn't necessarily done the actual role in a commercial sense. So he sent me his CV, we had a good conversation, and I spoke to him yesterday. And this is the impact since he finished his CV, I believe it was on the 21st of August. So his applications to first interview, the ratio was 15-1, which in a pandemic is not bad. However, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, that has gone down to 5-1. And at the moment, he's got 2 second interviews and 1 first interview. And if anyone is specifically looking for a really great product person, please reach out to Nathaniel. And I'm going to slide across now to show you what we did. I can't go through everything in too much detail because it will take too long. But one of the key things I want to show here is when you first look at the CV, and hopefully you can all see my mouse, is first of all, the obvious, the dates are not clear. Make those clear, have the month on there. Next thing, product owner and project manager, a normal kind of progression that you sometimes see. However, I have no idea what measure does. And the other frustration is I'm looking at a paragraph. Now I can very easily pick out some keywords and read the sentences around it, but it takes longer. And if someone isn't comfortable reading CVs or isn't used to it, this can take them a long time. The other problem is it's very difficult to pick out any sort of achievements from this. So this is what we did. We've changed the profile a little bit, and I'm not going to go into detail there. But if you look at the achievements, we've selected Measure. This is the company. It's a commercial hospitality app. He was the co-founder and product owner, which is great. So you can see an entrepreneurial flair there. And you can start to see some real value. His first customer was worth 96K. The app was downloaded 2,500 times. Another role here, Squiz. Again, achieving a 200% increase in adoption in the first 6 months. These are the things that are going to grab the attention of the person that's reading the CV. So dig deep and actually see what you can do and what you can pull out from the work that you've already done in the past. Now let's go to responsibilities, because again, this is very different to what we had before. It's no longer a paragraph. It's clear bullet points. And as you can see, it's far easier to digest the information you're getting through. So you're getting through, he's done some user research interviews. He's comfortable with that. He's done some wireframing. He's built an MVP. He's worked with engineering teams. All of these are relevant to the types of jobs that Nathaniel is applying for. And that is the reason why these ratios over here have improved so much. So again, reach out to Nathaniel if you are looking for a product person. So thank you for that, mate, as well, for letting me use your CV. Now, the interview. This is tricky because a product role will differ dramatically from company to company, from level, from industry, and obviously from country as well. So what I've tried to do is just take some key pieces that are going to be relevant for everyone across the board. First thing is research, and I've use the product as the first point. We've had multiple candidates who have been rejected because they're going for a consumer-facing role and haven't downloaded the product. For me and for the clients that I speak to, that's just lazy. It should be really important that you have that level of curiosity where you want to download the product, you want to see it. And if it's a B2B business, send an email to the person that's arranging interviews and then putting you forward for the process, and ask them to give you some sort of trial so you can get on it. Another thing, go on to Crunchbase, check out news articles, look at the funding that that company's received, when it was, who are the VCs, are there any product launches that have happened recently, is there any other news? And the second part, or the third part here, is the LinkedIn profiles. Look at the background of the person that you are meeting. See if you can get an understanding of the structure of the company by looking at the people around it. And more importantly, common connections. So these two things that I've just mentioned, the news and the LinkedIn profiles, these are really great tips to prepare for that weird time between reception to lift to meeting room where there can be some awkward silences. You can almost prepare your small talk before you go in. The next point is, what is the problem the company is actually trying to solve? This isn't always available on the job description, but try and look on their website and get a sense, either from people that you know there or from any articles that have been put out. And finally, ask your recruiter. They will know what's important. Now, on to actually answering the questions. There's lots of different methodologies. My personal preference is STAR, and this is all around how to tell the story. So STAR is obviously situation, task, action, result. This framework naturally creates a narrative. So situation, you want to try and be as specific as you can. So when was this occurring? Who was the company? What were the stakeholders you were working with? What did the team look like? Task is about what was the problem. And it's really important when you are giving your answer, you actually say the problem was, because again, it helps you create that structure and that narrative. The action is about what you did. And I've written it like that because it is about you. They are not looking at hiring your team. They want to see the value that you specifically have added. And again, result. This again is about commercial impact, money made or money saved. If you can bring that into your answer, it just carries so much more weight. Now, the other thing to help you is that creating a bank of several interview answers that are ready to go is going to make you feel far more confident and far more prepared for your actual interviews. Now, I've outlined 4 here, which I think are probably the most common that I've seen. There may be a few others, but asking a question around difficult stakeholders is quite common. And again, you can use the same answer for any sort of conflict or even leadership experiences that you want to show to the person that's interviewing you. Developing a new product or feature, this is a very, very common one. And sometimes the question is asked like, what's the product you're most proud of? And again, you can use the same answer as long as you've got that structure. Working with engineering design teams, and obviously failure. There are a lot of different hiring managers that like the question, what's your biggest fuck up? And that is really important to have about, I would say, a 2-minute answer, as with all of these, but this one is really important because it has to show a level of honesty. I don't want to hear, and I'm sure interviewers don't want to hear, oh, my biggest failure is I'm just too much of a perfectionist and it's occurred in this kind of scenario. That's not going to work. You need a level of honesty and a level of learning. But there are also other types of questions. So what's your favorite product? What would you add? What would you remove? Now, these kind of questions do come up, and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer, and there isn't a right product to pick. However, there are certain things here that the interviewer will be looking for. So the right product mindset, that is completely dependent on the business you're interviewing for. But it's important to kind of think about that and think about how you would like to work in product and just make sure that's conveyed. But there are certain considerations you should make, right? If you specifically pick, let's just say, for example, Uber, who are the competitors? What's the pricing like? What's the customer experience like? What's the problem they're solving? And also bring a level of creativity to the additional questions. And the biggest thing here is how you communicate those ideas. How engaging are you when you're conveying that? Are you getting someone who's listening to believe that is a good idea? The next question is probably a bit more of a sneaky one. And I know a few interviewers that put this right at the end when candidates might think the interview's finished. But this is, What are you passionate about outside of work? And tell me about it. So this specifically is a question that the idea is to generate some sort of insight into the personality of that person, but also to see how good someone is at selling or communicating an idea that maybe the interviewer has no idea about, and being able to get them interested or excited about it. That is a core part of a product management role. And that is a really good question to be able to demonstrate your skills in it. So that's the questioning. Then the tables turn, and it's about, what questions do you have? One of the key things I would say is avoid questions where you can find the answers on a JD or on the website. It's lazy and it doesn't really show a level of commitment that maybe the client would want to see. However, there are a few other questions that I would recommend. Are there any concerns that you have about my experience, or is there anything I can clarify for you? That's a great question, because you can actually address concerns there and then, rather than waiting for feedback and saying, oh, actually, I do have that experience. The next one is, what would success look like in this role, and how is it measured? This is very rarely articulated on a job description, and this is especially important for people that are looking to go and work with startups where maybe the hiring manager isn't a product person. It's a really good way to see if this role and the expectations of it are realistic, or are you being set up for failure? Why did you join the company, and has it lived up to expectations? Now, obviously, don't ask this to a founder, but if you're meeting a CPO or anyone in the engineering team or HR, it's a great question to ask. And what I would personally be looking for here is a level of honesty. And it also allows you to then probe and really get a sense of what the culture is actually like. So those kind of questions are really important to have before you go into any interview. Now, I'm aware I'm relatively short on time. So the art of proactive searching. Why do you do this? It creates more opportunities for you. There's less competition. It helps grow your network, which is a really important factor. Going back to the first thing that we talked about, those 3 routes, having a very strong network helps you across every single one of those. So where to start? How do I do it? First thing, align your CV and your LinkedIn profile. The more detailed your LinkedIn profile is, the more chance you have of being found, because you're going to come up in more searches. But also LinkedIn's algorithm prioritizes you above other people because you've got more detail in it. Once you've done that, go out and connect with people on LinkedIn and personalize your invites. I'm sure everyone has seen the statuses going out on LinkedIn where they're, people are getting fed up of the same old stuff. Personalize them and then begin to grow your network. And I've put an example on here. Congrats on the recent round of funding. Obviously shows you've done your research. I love the mission of the company. And after using your product, I feel it's definitely something I can get behind. So you've done the research, you've looked at the mission, you've used the product. This automatically becomes warm. So I wanted to reach out to you and see if you're growing your team. Would you be open to having a conversation? I know this can be daunting for a lot of product people, because it's like you're not used to doing it. And someone who's, coming from me, who's been doing sales for 10, 11 years, I was terrified too at the beginning. But once you start to see the results come back, the confidence skyrockets. And especially given the situation we're in, people are far more willing to help. So if you send a message like that, where it's clearly thought out and you've done your research, you will get a response. Next thing, put yourself out there, engage with relevant content and leave thoughtful comments through LinkedIn. Publish a blog on Medium, on a specific topic or product you're passionate about. That starts to draw attention. Obviously attend community events and meetups like Mind the Product. And because Mind the Product, like Mark said, I've been coming for about 8 or 9 years to these sorts of events, and product people are so easy to talk to. It's one of those skills where the natural level of curiosity in people just leads to great conversations. And that leads on to my next point. It's very easy to find a mentor in these sorts of events. And you can do it in a far less formal way. You can set that conversation up at the pub, when we can go back to one, and build on it from there. But having a mentor is extremely important, because you can bounce ideas off that person. You can get some advice on interviews or career choices, and obviously utilize their network, which is going to benefit you in the longer term. So definitely, if you haven't done so already, make a conscious effort to start putting things like that in place. Now, I've spoken to a lot of people over the last 7 months. People are nervous. There are people losing their jobs. It is tough, but I want to put some positive news and leave it on a positive note. So there are more and more non-digital businesses that are being pushed to grow and to innovate. Startups, on the other hand, are also powering through. Their VCs have been backing them and there's money coming in. And there was an article today, actually in the top right of LinkedIn, that said tech jobs have risen dramatically in the last month. And even pre-COVID, massive gap between the number of jobs versus the actual number of skilled candidates. And that's only going to increase. And with COVID, definitely one of the benefits is remote working. And that's going to open up far more opportunities for you across Europe and obviously across the world. So the situation right now, there's a talent shortage. There are more and more companies that are going to be growing. Your skill sets are going to be in demand. So I'm picturing a really positive future and higher salaries. So good luck. Hopefully I can help further in the future. One of the things we are doing is if you want to send an email to hello@fewandfar.io, we have a CV tips sheet that you can review. And if you want to email me personally, all my details are there. However, just please be patient because I've got quite a few people already that are coming through. So yes, I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. And I can imagine just looking at some of the comments and some of the questions that are coming through, you will have some emails after this on top of your inbox already. But that's really good because I really liked how you obviously gave us a lot of practical advice when we're looking for a job, some tips and tricks there, which are super valuable. And I loved how you ended on a positive note. So thank you for that. And we're now going to move on to our final speaker, Hope Gurian. She is ready, is based in San Francisco. And I've known Hope for a few years now. She's also no stranger to Mind the Product, and Product Tank has presented before. Very experienced product leader, and for the last few years has been running Fearless Product, where she works with product individuals and product teams on product management best practices. I'm really intrigued by Hope's talk because she's going to talk about how do you get that next product job, that one that you really want, and how do you go about that. So with that said, Hope, the stage is yours. And yeah, again, I'm going to ask people to leave comments, to leave questions, because straight after Hope's talk, we're going to go into Q&A. So keep them coming up, keep collating them. And yeah, big virtual hand if you can add that as well for Hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. There's been so much awesome information to be shared. I'm sure we could totally fill up the Q&A with what Nick and Sari just shared, but I'm going to add a little more. What I have found is that there's oftentimes people who have an idea of the job that they want. Maybe it's 10 years from now. Maybe it's just the next best opportunity. And so they have that job in mind. But how to actually get that job is a little less clear. And so that's what I want to focus on today. So I can't see them, but if you wouldn't mind sharing in the YouTube comments, when you have, I'm assuming you're coming to this talk because you have that job in mind. If you can share it in the comments, whether you're looking for that next opportunity in your current company, or if you're really like, no, I need to go outside, because the information I'm going to give you today satisfies both, but the approach and how you leverage each of those is going to differ. So if you can add that to the comments, I'll be curious to see what is most relevant to all of you. And I want to just share a little bit more background for me, because while we just heard the perspectives from, somebody to help people during the recruiting process and somebody who's worked their way up through a number of positions, my experience is that I actually led product. I was chief product officer and SVP of product at a couple of different companies. I had large-ish teams of people with varying degrees of experience and levels within those teams. I now moderate the Senior Product Leader Council of SVPs and CPOs at a number of different companies. And I interview product leaders as part of a podcast that I do. And so my perspective today is going to be from the either hiring manager perspective or from the manager of the employee that wants that job that is not the job that they're in today. How do you reconcile that ambition with the reality of what you're doing right now so that you're well positioned to get that job that you seek in the future? And so I found in my career that I have often had to have that conversation, especially with the people on my team who want to build that bridge between what they are doing right now and that job that they seek in the future. And oftentimes they have maybe a oversimplified view that if I'm a product manager today, and let's say the job description or company role expectation says something like, 3 to 5 years experience, or the senior product manager says 5 to 7 years of experience. Once that person has been doing that job for, say, 3 years or 4 years, I'm not saying this is true of all of you, but sometimes they're like, well, time's up. Like I've been doing this for 4 years, so let's start talking about that next level, that next opportunity. And product people are ambitious, and they like to problem solve, and they like to see results quickly, and that's what makes them awesome people to work with and put in problem solving positions. But it doesn't always naturally fit with the cadence of opportunities being created within an organization, right? If the company's not growing at such a rate that they're adding more senior roles, or people aren't leaving, then there may not be this window of opportunity. And so when you're in that position as a product manager trying to get that job, or you're managing that person, trying to have a productive conversation with how to help that person get that job when it's not immediately available, it can be frustrating on both sides. And we want to figure out how to make that, instead of frustrating, more focused around a problem that we can solve together. And so, of course, it's not usually this clear, and it's not likely that these opportunities are just going to be served up on a silver platter. So what can we do instead? And so the first tip that I want to share is, how you can deconstruct from that job that you want in the future into what is possible to get there. So again, you may have this potentially oversimplified view of, well, I've been a product manager for 3.5 years, and it said that at 5 years I should be a senior product manager or a director or whatever, and I'm not there today. And so it's really not this direct a path. I wish it was, but it's not. In fact, usually what is more true, and I called this talk Solving the Puzzle, because I think that is sometimes what people want to believe, that there's these nicely constructed career ladders. And especially for people earlier in their career, they're like, look, I'm building the skills, I'm getting the experience, and I have a picture of what that future job looks like. And so I've got all the pieces of the puzzle. I need that job. The reality is the picture of what that job is probably not super clear, like the ripped up puzzle box that I'm showing here. And frankly, the pieces of the puzzle that need to fit together to achieve that job are also probably not that clear and obvious. And so how do we, as product people, take that desired outcome of that job and deconstruct it into both the opportunities and solutions that need to come true to achieve that desired outcome? And that's what we do as product people. We need to apply that same methodology to our own career aspirations. So really similar to what you've already heard today. And so this is the way that I think about it. And this is just for illustrative purposes. If you desire to ultimately, whether it's 1 year from now or 3 or 10 years from now, have aspirations to get to this job, it is super helpful not just to think about that job, but to think about the raw pieces of the puzzle, those components that when you deconstruct that job, help give you a picture of what it really means to be well positioned to credibly go after that job. And I love what Nick shared, because it is exactly what I think and what I advise both people who are on my teams and some of the clients that I coach today, is that if you don't have like 2 to 3 credible, results-oriented stories to share about how you can deliver on that expectation, the odds are you're not going to have the confidence, and they're not going to have the confidence to trust you with that set of responsibilities. So by sort of looking at, like, what does it mean to really have the responsibilities of that job, and to think about, do I have 2 to 3 good stories to tell that demonstrate that I have what it takes so that people can confidently consider me for that job, that is going to be the difference between you actually being positioned for that job and successfully landing that job, and what you need to do in terms of reflecting on what are the skills and experiences that I need to get right now in my current job. And so I want to give you another example of this. When I was coaching a client recently, she actually ended up being my client. Normally I'm coaching new product leaders, but the head of product at this company asked me to coach her because she was in a situation where she was super skilled, super effective in her role, and there just wasn't the opportunity to move her into the leadership position that she sought. And that's a hard situation because, of course, the manager wants to retain her, but the reality is there's just not an opportunity. And so as a sort of fix, he used me as sort of a coaching resource for her. And the very first thing that I did was say, okay, I don't know if that job is going to become available to you at this current company. And I can't solve for that. And you probably can't solve for that. But what we can solve for is, do you have what it takes to be well positioned for that job, whether it materializes in your company or at another company? And the best way to get a reality check on that is to go find that job that you seek, which for her was like a director of product role with people management responsibilities. Look, go out and find that job, that if they called you today about that job, that you would be excited to interview for that job. And just take those job descriptions and do this red, yellow, green highlighting exercise. Do you have 2 to 3 credible, impactful stories to tell about how you have solved for that responsibility in your past? And this is literally the reality of what she put together for that. And this is exactly what I used to do with my teams, so that they could really look at the evidence to which they could see, and we could all see on a shared visual of how well positioned am I today for that job that I seek. And where we have red, we need to look at what are the ways that I can solve for that today. And so that's sort of my next piece of advice. And not every manager, leader is going to be comfortable with this. But when I had people on my team who were like, Hope, I really think that I'm ready to be a director, and I'd like to be considered the next time a director job opens up, I'd say, you know what? I would love for you to be ready for that job too. Why don't you go and find that job at another company and interview for it, and just see if you really want that job and how well positioned you are and how well you understand the responsibilities and expectations of that job. And it really showed to me whether or not they really cared enough about their career progression to take that step. And it also gave them valuable information, because one of two things would happen. Either they would find out that they actually are really well positioned for that job and they feel very confident. And if they don't want to stay in their current role, I'm not going to get much value from them staying in that current role. And if they didn't, then we had something to work with in terms of, okay, now let's go back and have our professional development discussion around what are the gaps we need to close so that you can successfully tell the story in your next interview about why you are the best candidate for that particular job. And so this is how I would solve for that. So again, just like if you think about an opportunity for a product, right? You have your desired outcome, which is that job that you seek. You have your current situation that you're in, your status quo, and you have these gaps that you need to address. And if you've already done the work of looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 job descriptions, having informational interviews with 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are handling that responsibility today, you will start to see the pattern of those gaps, those responsibilities that you are going to need to tell. You're going to need to tell a credible story for, either in your resume or most likely in the interview. And if you can't do that today, then you need to have a conversation with somebody else in the company, maybe your manager, maybe a peer or a mentor, about what are the things that I can do to close out these gaps. And I have never, ever, ever worked at a company that didn't have more things to do than people and time to do them. And so if you can find that win-win between, if I feel like I'm not getting enough, maybe I'm really good at setting goals. Maybe I'm really good at doing user research, but maybe I'm really weak at demonstrating my financial acumen. Maybe there's a chance for me to do some scenario modeling. Maybe there's a way for me to do some profitability analysis. How can I round out my skills so that if that becomes an important expectation for that job when I'm interviewing for it, that I can tell a story about exactly what I did to solve for that need. And so that's how we try to deconstruct from getting from that job to where I am today, and be able to close those gaps. So I went through that pretty quickly, and I'd love to answer questions from you, but that's my advice for all of you on this call today.
Thank you so much for that, Hope. That was really insightful, particularly that longer term thinking and breaking it down, as you said. And I also like, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, that we as managers, if we're working with other product people, actively help them in progressing their career, even if it means beyond your existing organization. Absolutely love that. So thank you so much, all three of you, for your great presentations. And, it's fair to say we've got a lot to talk about in our Q&A. So I'm going to start with some questions that I collated whilst you were doing your talks. And please keep them coming. I will try to keep an eye on them. But there's already quite a few good ones that we can start with and build on. The first one is for Siri from James, who says, did you find significant role progression did that come within your own organization, or did you feel you had to move to another organization to progress?
So I've definitely had it both ways. I've had times when I've had to move, either because I decided the role wasn't right for me, or because there just wasn't any opportunity within the organization to get that role. But actually, I would say probably my most significant promotion has happened at Songkick, where it's been, I feel like you need two things. One, I always say, don't be afraid to move. I think people have different opinions on this, but I've met a lot of people that are really, really scared to leave the company they're in because they're worried it'll be worse. So I'm not saying you have to move for a promotion, but I think don't be afraid for that to be an option. And then the other thing is, I found that actually you're most likely to progress and have success if you have a manager that really wants to work with you. It sounds like Hope is that kind of manager. I had that kind of manager at Songkick. He's left now, but I wouldn't have. A lot of managers don't quite want to do that. That's just the honest fact. And I think you'll find that out within the first year or two if they're really interested in helping you progress and develop. And if there's not, there just might not be that much you can do about it. And I think in that case, being able to move. But I think if you have a manager that you can go to and say, I really want to develop, let's talk about these things, I want to improve these skills, are there opportunities? Then you can probably find great promotions within the same organization as well.
Cool. Thank you so much. And we've had a few questions, and I'm going to direct them at all of you if you want to jump in, where people are asking, how do I need to position myself if I want to get into product management, but I've never done a product role, or I've got a software engineering background, or I'm in sales. And I think if you could answer, maybe we'll mix up a little bit. Nick, particularly from a CV perspective, the question is, are there specific skills that you recommend or assets you recommend including in a CV? And Hope or Siri, from your perspective, what are the stories you can tell to position yourself in the right way if you're looking to make that transition? Nick, do you want to start?
Okay, make sure I'm not on mute again. It's a really good question, and it depends which direction you're coming from. One of the first things I would say is if you're looking to get into a product management role, go and find a job description of the type of role you want to get into. Look at the key things they want to see. I guarantee you would have done some of those. So if you come, like Nathaniel was a great example, okay? So his role, I didn't go into it, but he was an account manager before that. Nothing to do with product, but elements of that role, such as working with design, working with engineering, being involved in getting insight from customers. Each role will have an element of product, and I would utilize that. But then again, if you're just relying on, highlighting that in your CV and you're not doing anything else, you're going to have to send out a lot of applications. And I would also recommend, like I said again, like go to events, network, speak to people. That's where you're really going to be able to get your passion and your message across.
Cool, great, thank you. And from a storytelling perspective, right? So Nick obviously talked about some specific things you can include in your CV. What would you recommend if I've never done product before, or used to be an engineer or in sales? Hope or Siri, any tips?
Do you want to go, Hope?
Yeah, I'll share. So I guess there's a couple of different layers to the people who aspire to get into product but haven't actually filled a product role, and it's a tough leap to make because the job is not consistent organization to organization, and the expectations aren't consistent, right? And so for me, the advice that I always have is, if you aspire to get into product and you're early in your career, look for those sort of associate product manager roles, because that's sort of, they don't have an expectation that you're going to come with a ton of experience, right? And so like if you can demonstrate that you've done adjacent work, customer support or enablement, analysis, user research, things like that, then you're well positioned to get that APM role. If you want to make sort of a parallel, adjacent move from, say, head of engineering to product, you're probably best positioned to do that within your own organization where you're already a proven commodity. You've demonstrated results. You have a different perspective to offer. You're actually problem solving your organization's problems. I feel like it's much harder, not impossible, but harder to make that transition the more sort of senior the level is in product.
Great.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the things I would add are, there's a lot of, I don't know, for the people that are asking, if you know, there's technical product managers, you might have heard a bit about those, they're often looking for people that have higher technical skill. So if within your own organization, you can try and move even into a tech lead role, maybe from a tech lead role where you're picking up those bits and pieces of organization, of working with others, you might be able to move. A technical product manager role might be a bit easier because they'll value your technical experience in a way that some, non-technical product manager roles might not value as much. And then in terms of just telling the story, I agree. I think it is quite difficult to do because people do like to see, if you're hiring a product manager, you want to know that they've done product before. It's the easiest way they've done the job. But if you're in a similar role, even if you're looking for those kind of associate or earlier roles where they're not expecting too much product knowledge, the easiest way to stand out from all the other people applying to those kind of entry-level roles is to be able to kind of show those outcomes. Especially if you're in something like sales, you will have those measurable outcomes. If you're in tech, what was the benefit of so you've built something. Don't just say you built it and with what technology you built it with. Did it make things faster, more efficient? Did it make you any money as a company? Go out to the people in your organization and find out what the value of that thing you did that was different from product, whether it was marketing, whatever it was. So you can at least have that in your CV and you're at least showing that you have some of that product mindset. But again, yeah, you probably want to start lower and put out quite a lot of applications to get there.
And I wanted to sneak in a question for Nick. This is my question, because I've heard a lot of feedback, obviously, where people get a bit nervous about either titles, because, head of product in company A might not be the same thing as head of product in company B, for instance, in terms of line management. But also they're worried about, transferable skills from sectors. How much do we need to worry about those two things, if at all?
Look, product management is still very undefined and inconsistent across the UK. It is far more consistent in the US, and it's much more of a recognized skill set. We've definitely got better. And the titles themselves are probably less relevant. I think I almost kind of group them into product leadership, product managers, and then you've kind of got your, CPO level people. But again, a CPO can be called a VP, a head of in one organization can be a product owner, another one. It's very difficult to tell. And I think titles are not going to make that much of a difference as long as you're in the ballpark. The key thing is being able to demonstrate the experience and the level of responsibility you've had. And on the second point, in terms of industry, like swapping industries and that kind of stuff, the reason why as a business we're industry agnostic is because it doesn't make sense to focus on one industry. What matters is the product that you build. That's far more transferable, right? So as an example, if you take someone like Betfair in the gaming space, that business is a huge company with millions and millions of users that aims to move customers from point A to point B and create a transaction. You could very easily do a role in Betfair and it will be very, very similar in terms of the skill set, in terms of the product in eBay, for example, because again, it's a very similar sort of thing. So industry for me doesn't necessarily matter. The more industry experience you have, I feel like that's potentially quite good, but people tend to focus on a specific type of product.
Gotcha. Thank you. And there's a few more questions building on that. Any specific advice more for the people who are looking for, freelance product roles? We had a question just coming in from Laura who said, I want to position myself as even as an interim head of product. And in her case, she's got lots of business knowledge, not necessarily product knowledge. But have you got any tips, all three of you, in terms of how you need to position your story or CV if you're looking for interim or freelance roles?
I mean, I can share if that's so I do some interim VP of product work. I think it is, well, here's what I'll say. More often than not, those opportunities come from people who've worked with me personally in the past, and they know that I can ramp up quickly, that I can, they trust me to tell them the truth, and and that they're generally looking to hire somebody, and maybe I can throw some names their way. I think that it is, I don't know how easy it would be for me to just position myself, because it is not something that people usually are actively advertising for, right? It's like, I'm going to hire, probably more often than not, I thought it would take 2 months to find somebody and I was going to just deal with it. And it's turned into 8 months. And now the teams are struggling, or I'm losing people, and now it's become an emergency. And so I'm trying to figure out who can quickly, and it has the availability, and, it wants to work that way. So it's a tricky thing to position yourself for, but I would say the best thing you could do is let your network know and keep letting them know that if they find themselves in that position, that you are available to have a chat.
I 100% agree with everything that Hope said. Like, contract product management roles, never mind heads of product, are not that common, just because it's a role where you really need to have between 6 and 12 months to make some sort of impact. Obviously, there are roles where you kind of, plug the gap, but it depends on what your long-term view is. If your view is to eventually, I want to go into that portfolio route where I'm, not doing 5 days a week with one company, maybe I'm working with 3 or 4 at the same time, then quite a nice way of doing it is transitioning by taking on some freelance work on the side of your permanent role. So you could go to a startup and say, hey, look, I can help you once or twice a month just to help you with your strategy. Startups love that, because as CEO or founder of the business, you don't really know exactly what product management entails. So that's quite a good way of doing it, and then building your portfolio that way. But if you want to just be a 5-day-a-week contractor, yeah, I agree with that. You're going to really struggle.
Thank you. Got a question from Nathan, and I'm going to point him at you, Siri, if that's okay. Maybe Hope you can chip in as well. Where Nathan is asking, how do you make the leap from being a product manager to managing product managers, when the key differences between the two roles are, things like line managing, leading an organization, hiring, etc., that you can't necessarily demonstrate from your current role? Any tips there based on your own experience?
Yeah, so I've actually made that change recently. I think Hope said something that I think really applies to it, in that it feels, generally from what I've seen, you're more likely to get that opportunity within an organization than going with no management experience to another organization to manage product managers. I think people will want you to have done some management of product managers, and where you are, if you're in your situation where there just there's no one else to manage, maybe you're a team of 2, it's you and your manager. We're hopefully looking at, in the next few months, doing internship and work experience placements. I noticed that on one of your docs, Hope. Try and talk to, if I didn't make it clear enough, I really think internships and work experience are so important. And I'm always there's not that many in products, and I'm always kind of, hoping that more and more will be created. So not only will that be an opportunity for you to, get that management experience and to actually at least do some of the beginning bits of figuring out how you work with someone to help them shine, because it's very different from just being good at something yourself. It's how can you actually communicate that to someone else. I think trying to look at internships and getting your company on kind of the internship bandwagon. I think a lot of companies they don't really do that in product. They might do it in other areas, but they're quite hesitant to do product internships. But it was invaluable to me. So I think doing that. And then actually for a lot of other things leading an organization, some of it is actually, you will learn a lot about that stuff from the work you do in product. There's not many roles where you're working with quite as many people and trying to lead quite as many different kinds of people as a product role. So I think you'll find some of that does translate. when it comes to things like hiring, I think hiring internships and things are a great way to see that. Get involved in other people's hiring. At Songkick, one of the great things is because we're quite a small company, and also because we try and have quite good hiring practices, a lot of people are involved in hiring for different roles. So maybe you can't hire for a PM, but if someone hiring a designer, can you get involved in checking CVs and helping them along the way? So I think look for that experience. But yeah, I think it's quite hard to make that jump if you don't have anything to show yet.
Cool, great. One tip, even though the question wasn't necessarily for me, I always encourage, again, you will touch on it, is mentoring as well. So again, particularly that people manage. If you got stories around, I mentioned a colleague of mine, even though it wasn't his or her line manager or someone in the product community, and this is how he or she developed as a result. Again, it's just a story that you can tell to position yourself in the right way. And Sarah is asking, do you feel, and I'm going to start maybe with Nick from a UK perspective, and I'd love also to get US perspective on this, Hope, because Sarah's asking, do you feel like it's harder to get into product than it was, let's say, 5+ years ago, as the skill set has formalized and homogenized more? Nick, offensive phase. Shall we start with Hope? Because I can imagine in San Francisco and California, you've got product managers galore.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's very geographically specific. So to generalize for the whole US and maybe for the whole UK might be challenging. But like San Francisco, yeah, the expectations are real high. There's a lot of good. Oh, you haven't done product at, Google, Facebook, Twitter, whatever the like big names are, like then you haven't really done product. Like it's very snobby, and I don't excuse it, but that's the reality. Whereas if you're working in another market where, like, if you're recruiting and we're not working virtually, and you really want like in-person teams, your consideration set, you probably are going to be a lot more open-minded and probably have to make some compromise. You're probably not going to be able to get the person who ticks off every single box and comes from like a really respected brand name product company. And so that's what I've seen in this market.
It's a little bit more difficult for me because we don't necessarily focus on like the entry level roles. So I can only make some predictions or like, based on seeing people's progression. Because product is becoming more and more prevalent in the UK, more people want to get into it. I think if you were looking at it 5 years ago, people would definitely consider people that were like, if you've been doing UX and you wanted to make that switch, or you've been a BA or you've been an engineer, it was far more straightforward to do that. I actually think there's more opportunities now because it's becoming more recognized as a skill set. So it's a difficult balance, but I'd always recommend, like, if you want to get into it, do it internally where you currently are if you can. That's the easiest route. But in terms of the question, it's probably about the same. More people want to get into it, but there's more opportunities. So
cool. I've got 2 more questions. We're going to go over slightly for those, but there's still quite a lot of people watching us, and there's some really good questions here, and I want to make sure we capture as many as we can, if that's okay with you as well, obviously. Question from Ali, who's saying, do you think part-time product management is possible? Is it a role that you can do part-time?
I'm going to let you two handle that one. You know better than I do.
What do you think, Sari?
I mean, all things are possible.
Yeah.
I think technically, I think it's a difficult one. I would err on the side of, I really do think, everything could be possible. Maybe 2 people part-time or a team part-timing, but I think it would be difficult, mainly because product manager is one of the roles where, sometimes, 2 days holiday, and you come back and you're like, what has happened? How did everything devolve so quickly? And you might think you put all these structures in place, but the reality is often, unfortunately, I think in some ways, because of the role, there are still silos, there are ways of making decisions and things that might sit with you. And so I think the difficulty is kind of what happens when you're not around, and what kind of structures can you put in place so that you can do that. So it might be one of the things, I've heard of hybrid roles where 2 people do the same role part-time, and that could work quite well. But I don't know, I've never heard of anyone doing it. I don't know if you have. Maybe also, I can imagine maybe a more senior level where you're more advisory rather than, devs asking you day to day for what am I meant to do on this ticket? and they're not going to be around for 2 days, you might end up being a bit of a blocker. But I'd be interested to know what Hope has seen.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of sort of job share, if that's the sort of model for a product manager role. But I also think like it really comes down to like how much of product at your organization is truly a team sport. If it's very like functional in the roles and responsibilities, I think it's hard because like the product person sometimes is the glue keeping that all together. And so it's hard to subdivide or know how to subdivide or keep shared understanding is hard enough with a team, let alone with another person who is expected to have the same level of judgment and decision-making and knowledge as you. Like, I think that's just hard, but nothing's impossible.
I love that. Yeah, go on.
You mentioned role share. That clicked something in my head. But there's a lady that I've spoken to relatively recently, maybe a couple of months ago. I'm sure she won't mind me saying her name's Polly Hoden, and she has a company at role share. Okay, you guys know. So I think that's what her company focused on. I don't know the full details, but it does seem like, especially now with remote working, it kind of does seem like it's going to be more possible.
Cool. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. And Nick, if it's okay, I'm going to finish with you because I liked how you ended your talk on a positive note, and I appreciate that there might be quite a lot of uncertainty and people are nervous even on this call tonight. But I have to give it to you, or have to share with you that Fuad maybe is not having it, because Fuad is saying, "Are you not worried about particularly big organizations?" Combining product roles with other roles, basically mixing it up a little bit because they're, they have to save costs. So they're just going to do things like that.
I mean, there's definitely going to be companies that are going to need to cut costs, right? That's naturally going to happen. But there's going to be far more companies that need to innovate and need to utilize digital. COVID has been great in the sense that it's accelerated the need for that to happen. So yes, there will be reorganizations. Yes, there'll be people being made redundant. But we're a resilient bunch. Product people are needed. It's one of those skills that is not easily. There's very few people that have the natural capability of being able to go out and nail it. You have to naturally work towards it. And I think because of that, there's just not enough good product people there. And it's the same with engineering as well, by the way. A huge shortage of engineers. It's not just product, and same with design. There's just not enough product, engineering, design, data people out there to handle the level of demand that we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years. So yes, companies will make redundancies. There will be restructures, of course, but there will be 10 other businesses out there that are hiring for that person. So I'm personally not worried, but maybe I'm biased because of that's kind of one of the areas that our company focuses on.
So go on, Siri.
I was going to say that I can imagine a situation where product people are just taking on more and more, kind of having more and more products. And actually, because generally the ratio of product to engineering, there's generally a lot more engineers. So any company that believes in the value of product people, there'll be companies that haven't really got there yet and they're still kind of just pottering around. But for companies that believe in it, I think they're going to recognize that one product person is worth it when they have like that one person is kind of making sure that the team of 50 people you have is actually delivering value. So,
right. Is it a cost center or a value creation center?
Exactly,
and that will tell you everything.
Yeah.
100%. So on that note, no more questions, but I want you to leave the audience, if you don't mind, and I'm not going to put you in the spot. I'm going to go first with, because we're talking about, career advice and progression and stuff, anything that, one final sentence that you want to leave the audience with. So for instance, I'm going to just keep it very simple. And I'm going to say, I'm going to +1 what Siri said about not to worry. Yes, being a product manager is not easy, especially when you don't have a job or it's uncertain, but I still think it's the best role in the world. And yes, go with the bumps and it will be fine. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. You got to love the mess. It's messy to figure out how to get the next job, and it's messy to figure out what to do when you're a product person for your own products. So just love the mess.
Love the mess. I like that. Siri.
I think I'll just say that, those measurable outcomes. If you're trying to get into product, you're already in product, whatever it is, your CV should be, the stuff Nick showed about your CV should be clear, easy to read, and it should have numbers in it. And that's most likely that someone will notice you and hopefully increase that ratio of applications you're doing.
Excellent. Nick.
Sarah just stole mine. No, I was gonna. I think for me, go away, write your answers to those 4 interview questions, have them in the bank, and go out and network.
Amazing. Again, I'm going to do a big hand. I'm sure you'll get lots of virtual hands. Thank you so much for your talks, your answers to the questions. I'm sure people will be in touch with you afterwards for any follow-up conversations and questions. But thank you again, and to the audience, thank you so much for joining. And I look forward to seeing you again at the next Product Tank next month in October.
Thank you.